The East Africa sun was high and relentless, casting long shadows as Daniel and Emily stepped off the small, humming plane onto the rust-red soil. They were no strangers to adventure, but this journey felt different, more primal, more mysterious. Daniel, with his sun-kissed blonde hair and steady blue eyes, was a renowned wildlife photographer, while Emily, his graceful wife, with flaming auburn hair and emerald eyes, was an archaeologist. They had explored many wild corners of the world, but today they were about to embark on their most daring expedition yet. After days of safaris and ancient ruins, Daniel overheard a local guide speak in hushed tones about an isolated village deep in the northern forests, a place untouched by time. The guide spoke of Ulimwengu wa Zamani, the ancient world, where the villagers lived as if frozen in centuries past. Intrigued, they decided to venture there, chasing the thrill of the unknown. Their journey was arduous. With their hired guide, they trekked for days through thick forests, the air growing more humid and denser with each passing mile. They slept under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of unseen wildlife, the thrill of discovery pushing them forward. After a week, they finally reached a plateau draped in mist. Below them lay the village, Ulimwengu wa Zamani, just as the guide had described, nestled in the heart of the forest like a forgotten relic. But the moment they entered the clearing, everything changed. Villagers, mostly elderly men and women with skin weathered by the sun, emerged from their homes, staring in disbelief. Children peered from behind their mothers, wide-eyed and curious. The village fell into an eerie silence. Daniel and Emily paused, exchanging glances, wondering what had caused this sudden stillness. "They are white!" a woman gasped in Swahili, her voice barely audible. Daniel and Emily looked around, confused. The villagers seemed stunned, frozen in place. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then, an old man with a staff stepped forward. His wrinkled face was solemn, his eyes sharp. He approached the couple cautiously, as if afraid to get too close. "They have returned," he whispered in Swahili, pointing at Daniel and Emily. "The gods, they have returned." A sudden wave of murmurs swept over the villagers, and within moments, the entire community dropped to their knees, bowing before Daniel and Emily. It was only then that the couple understood. They were being mistaken for gods. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Daniel, they think we're divine." Daniel looked over the bowed heads of the villagers. "This is insane." But the village elder was already speaking again, this time in broken English. "You have come from the sky. The prophecy is true. The gods have returned to save us." Before they could protest, the villagers erupted into joyous celebration. Music filled the air as drums began to beat rhythmically, and a procession was formed to lead the gods to the center of the village. Daniel and Emily were swept into the heart of the celebration, carried on the tide of the villagers' reverence and awe. The village chief, a towering man with an air of authority, approached them later that evening. His face was serious, his dark eyes glinting in the firelight. "You must prove your power," he said in a low voice, his English halting but clear. "Tomorrow you will face the sacred trial. If you succeed, you will bring prosperity to our people." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Sacred trial? What kind of trial?" The chief simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "You will see at dawn." That night, Daniel and Emily lay in a simple hut, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. Outside, the village continued to celebrate, unaware of the growing tension between the couple. "This is madness," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "We have no idea what this trial even is. What if we can't do it?" Daniel turned to her, his eyes calm yet determined. "We'll figure it out. They think we're gods, Emily. We just need to make sure we live up to that. For now, we can't let them down." The next morning, the village was alive with anticipation. The air was thick with tension as the villagers led Daniel and Emily to the outskirts of the forest, where a large stone circle stood, ancient and imposing. The chief raised his arms and addressed the crowd in his native tongue, then turned to the couple. The sacred trial, he explained in English, is a test of strength, wisdom, and courage. You must cross the great gorge, retrieve the sacred stone, and return before sunset. Emily's heart raced. The great gorge was a steep ravine, its sides crumbling and treacherous. A rope bridge, frayed and barely intact, swayed ominously in the wind. Daniel took Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady. "We'll get across, grab the stone, and be back before sunset." The villagers watched with bated breath as Daniel and Emily approached the edge of the gorge. Emily looked down, her stomach twisting in knots. The drop was dizzying, the jagged rocks below waiting to catch any misstep. One cautious step at a time, they crossed the creaking rope bridge, their hearts pounding with every sway. Halfway across, a gust of wind nearly knocked Emily off balance, but Daniel caught her just in time, pulling her close. "We've got this," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "Just a little further." Finally, they reached the other side. Beyond the gorge lay a small stone altar, upon which rested a large, glowing stone, the sacred stone. It shimmered in the sunlight, casting an ethereal glow over the surrounding trees. Emily picked it up carefully, feeling its weight in her hands. "Let's get back," she said, a hint of urgency in her voice. But as they turned to cross the bridge again, the unthinkable happened. With a loud snap, one of the ropes gave way, sending the bridge swinging wildly. Emily gasped, gripping Daniel's arm. "There's no way back," she cried. Daniel scanned the ravine, his mind racing. "We'll find another way." He pointed to a narrow path along the edge of the gorge, winding through the trees. "We'll have to climb around." The path was narrow and treacherous, but with the villagers' chants echoing in the distance, they knew they had no choice. Hand in hand, they climbed along the edge, every step a battle against gravity. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and their time was running out. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the village just as the sun began to set. Exhausted but victorious, they presented the sacred stone to the chief, who held it high for all to see. The villagers erupted into cheers, their voices rising like the sound of 1,000 birds taking flight. The chief smiled for the first time, bowing deeply before Daniel and Emily. "You are truly the gods foretold," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You have saved our village." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, Daniel and Emily were showered with gifts and blessings. The villagers continued to celebrate late into the night, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of genuine admiration and joy. Later that evening, as they sat by the fire, Emily leaned into Daniel's shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "We made it," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "We sure did," he said softly, gazing at the starry sky above them. And as the villagers sang songs of praise and gratitude, Daniel and Emily realized that this journey had given them more than just an adventure. It had given them an unforgettable bond with a people who for one brief moment believed in the magic of gods who had come to save them. The next morning, as they prepared to leave the village, the chief approached them one last time. "You will always be welcome here," he said with a smile. "You are family now." With full hearts, Daniel and Emily waved goodbye, knowing they had been part of something far greater than they ever imagined. They had come to East Africa seeking adventure, but had left behind a legacy of hope, courage, and a touch of divine magic.